Good morning. This is Playing to Win with me, Mark Henderson Leary, and my good friend Brad Freyer. After a raucous Mother's Day weekend, how are you this morning, Brad?
I'm making it. It was a long weekend, but I'm here and I'm vertical, which is a good start to the week.
Yeah, Mother's Day is typically like that. Pretty much, it's like Super Bowl. It's like, intense or Burning Man, maybe.
Party,
Is that a better example? I don't know.
yeah, absolutely. Keg stands, Jello shots, the whole 9 yards. Absolutely, man. DJ. No, man, we had uh, a 50th birthday celebration on Friday.
Not your own.
Prom,
You attended one.
not
It was
my
not.
own.
Yeah.
Yeah, correct. Prom on Saturday for my
Your prom,
oldest.
though. That was actually your
That
prom.
was that was actually mine. Yeah, yeah. And then Mother's Day all day yesterday. So, and then I started this morning off with a 6 a.m. Phone call. So, as my first meeting of the day. So I have I like sleep, and I believe you like sleep too, which makes us kindred spirits. And so I'm tired. I'm gonna be honest.
Man, so sleep is absolute. I believe in being ready. I believe in being at my best. And after having struggled with, like I'm a late riser too. So like I'm creative
Mm,
type. So I like to stay up late and get up late when the sun is good and warm. And so that's always been me. And through high school and through college, and then into the work world, and then and IT and business and all these things, it's been the exact opposite of that. And for like 20, 30 years, I was just like, are you supposed to be tired like this all the time? And I finally obsessed over what it was to get rested. And man, I've really come to be so grateful for really important sleep routines and what it does for the quality of work I can produce and how I
yeah.
can feel better about life. And so all that to say, I'm a huge believer in treating myself like a high performance machine. And I mean, I have caffeine, so I'm not one of those. I'm not like Tom Brady, but I do believe that I have to take care of myself as my work product to a large extent, and make sure that sleep and rest and proper nutrition for me, and proper working out makes a huge difference in how I can bring value to the people I work with.
Yeah, totally agree. Totally agree. I mean, if you don't get the rest, if you don't take care of yourself, you're going to be sluggish. If you're sluggish, you're not going to be focused. You're not going to be paying attention to what's important. You're just going to kind of stumble through. So yeah, I totally agree. So um, we're gonna pull it together today. We're gonna make it happen.
Well, we absolutely will. So I'm curious, thinking about the preparation and rest, thinking about like maybe calls that come up, and if you've got a sales call or a meeting with somebody, a client or an employee, and you're thrown off by whatever happens, when, like, say, right out, like 5 minutes after you start the call, you realize you're kind of getting a barrage of things, and you're not feeling prepared. How do you handle that?
Well, it's funny you ask, because that's actually what happened to me at 6 o'clock this morning. So not only was I not completely awake, but um, the preparation for this call had I asked what the intent for the call was and what needed to be prepared, and was told, nothing, it's just catch up conversation, da 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 da. Well, very quickly on the call, it turned into a very demanding conversation of, I'm expecting this, and where's this, da 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 da, and I wasn't expecting that conversation to go that way, wasn't prepared for that conversation, and so it felt a little bit of an attack. Um, but I mean, obviously that's not their perception of it, because that wasn't their intent. But what there's any time I feel like I'm being attacked, right? You can almost feel like it, because it's either like a person wagging their finger at you, like that critical parent. Well, where is this? Why didn't you do this? How come we're not da da da? And you can almost feel like you're being attacked by a parent, and not
Yeah.
physically attacked, but just assertively questioned. There's a tendency.
Yeah, and I think in those moments
Mhm,
sometimes, and just to pause on this thought, is like, if I get into that mode and somebody's criticizing me or coming at me with some negativity,
mhm.
there's a part of me that kind of goes to the assumption that I did something wrong.
Okay. Yeah.
And
Well,
so
yeah.
I
Yeah.
have
That.
to like this. There's something
that
about
gut
this.
feeling, that initial gut
Yeah,
feeling.
like
Yeah.
I'm in the principal's office. Like, that's a good example. Like sometimes I found myself in the principal's office. Do you know why you're here? Not really, to be honest. But I know I'm in
This
trouble,
time.
and I know I'm supposed to feel bad, and so I am. I absolutely feel bad.
Yeah. Whatever I did, I'm sorry.
Yeah. So I think that carries forward into life. It's like the client's angry, and it's like, well, okay, what did I should have this, and I do think in situations where it's like with troubled relationships with a troubled client, there are hundreds of decisions that can be made along the way, and there are opportunities to make choices, make different choices. Should I fire the client right now? Should I call them right now and tell them this is unacceptable? Should I be harder? Should I pull back? Should I move forward? What should I have done? I know my onboarding process is good, but not great. It could have been that much better. What could I do to have solved this in the past? I kind of go inward on that, and it's sometimes it puts me in a position of not feeling as strong as I could, and I start to want to kind of lash out in those moments and say, like, just never mind, go away if you're gonna.
Well, and that's the emotion, right? That's the
Yeah.
emotion. Whenever we take it inward, we're going to attempt to rely on emotion to help us through. How do I feel? How do I feel like just like when you're sitting in the principal's office, that feeling is the emotion, that emotion of fear, that emotion of being a scared little child. And so when you're in the principal's office and you don't know why you're there, your mind is thinking to yourself, it wasn't me, I didn't do it. And so you've got this built-in defense mechanism of being a child, that when you're in a position where there's a person of authority sitting opposite of you, you have this defense tendency, this defend and justify tendency, or you've heard of the old fight or flight.
Yes.
When attacked, people have a tendency to take flight or fight. To take flight is that defense mechanism, right? It's that wasn't me, I didn't do it, and you're just trying to get away from the situation. Or you can fight, to which you said, well, maybe we shouldn't work together. Maybe this isn't a good fit. But once again, that's emotion.
Now, I've heard people also add a third. They say fight, flight, or freeze. And I've heard other people sort of debate, like there's no such thing as freeze. It's a version of fight or something. Or flight. I don't actually know. Now that I said it, do you think freeze is a third option, or do you bucket test that
I would think freeze would probably fall more into the flight, right? Where you're just trying to remove yourself from the situation. So what do? You just shut off.
Turn invisible. Hold my breath.
Yeah. Can't see me.
Yeah.
But there's that middle stage, right? Because you can fight, which is aggressive emotion. You can flight, you can leave the situation, which is a childish emotion, but nonetheless, it's emotional. And so the range in the middle is that adult, unemotional, intellectual processing of the circumstances, right? And so when I'm in a conversation that I didn't expect to be in, and there's what feels like emotion coming from the other side, whether it's an emotion of frustration or anger or and it doesn't even necessarily mean that person had emotion. It was my perception or how I processed it, right? Because words have no meaning. It's how you process the words that give the words meaning, right? And so when they're saying things to me and I'm processing it, my mind is thinking, okay, just maintain low tones.
Yeah.
Maintain low.
Chris Voss talks about that. The late night FM DJ voice. If you've ever heard or listen to like books, I talk about a book and it's like there's pages. No, it's audible, right? So I listen to all my books, but Never Split the Difference is a fantastic book on that kind of thing.
That's great. Never Split the Difference. Okay, I need to write that one down. I need to read that one.
Yeah. Chris Voss is definitely required reading for sure.
But the maintain low tones is just don't react, don't get emotional, don't turn into a conflict. And so, what does that mean? That means slowing down, keeping your breathing and your heart rate in check, and asking questions, right?
And asking questions. So Ken Proctor, a good friend of mine, tries to beat it into my head. And Ted Lasso also brought the point home with the Whitman quote of be curious, not judgmental. And that is such a rich statement that I have continued to sort of try to unpack and utilize. And it's so hard. And by judgmental, in the moment of judgment is making a decision about their intent. It is, this person is trying to fire me. This person is trying to make me look bad. This person is not smart. This person is never going to get it. That's probably my worst one. Like, this person just is not going to get it. And so that's a judgment. And so now I'm trying to play defense or do something that's not useful, as opposed to saying, okay, that's interesting that you would have that perspective. How could I get curious? How could I ask questions and really build some habits? And I found that skill to be both powerful and maddeningly difficult to try to, because those judgments come. All it takes is somebody to say something that just packages in a way like, oh, I've heard this before. I know where this is going. And that to me is the clue that as soon as I think I know where this is going, and as soon as I feel like this is a lost cause, that's the judgment. And I got to walk myself back to, like, what question can I ask that's actually curious about what I just heard?
Well, and the other challenge, right, is if you're being pushed for answers for something. Hey, why haven't you done this? When are we going to get that? Even though that's not something that was expected or was promised, right?
Yeah.
Then you realize, okay, well, how do I maintain low tones? How do I not get defensive? How do I not say, well, if you had just blank, right, and attack back, because that only creates more conflict. So, the thing that we talk about when we're dealing with customer service training. I talk to my daughters about this because, anytime they're in conflict with friends, the old saying is you have to fix the person before you can fix the problem. So what does that mean? Well, that means,
because it sounds like you're trying to control them. We need to fix, like, you need to fix that person.
Yeah.
you just get in there and you monkey with them and you get them right. And once they're right.
But when we talk about fix the person, all we're talking about is that emotion, right?
Yeah.
So
focus on the person's getting them whole, finding out what they're after.
Yeah. Allow them the opportunity to be heard, give them the opportunity to be understood, allow that emotion to subside. And when the emotion begins to subside, then you can begin to talk in an intellectual fashion without emotion, in the adult mindset and in the adult frame of mind, and begin to solve the problem. So, if you've got emotion, if you're an emotional creature, you have to learn how to manage the emotion, because the emotion will destroy you.
And I'm absolutely an emotional creature.
Oh,
absolutely. Man. So if I'm on a call or talking to somebody and they're hot and I'm trying to do the late night FM DJ voice, I'm actually kind of the skin, I'm clammy, the hair on the back of my neck's up and my heart rate's going fast, and I'm trying, because I've sensed it. Like, this is the wild ant. This is the tiger, right? Like, this tiger isn't eating me, but could. And so I got to, how do I get the tiger to lay down? And so that's the hard part. But to your point, it's about, you gotta get curious and unpack it until they finally say, like, oh, you finally listened to me. Okay, yes. Now that's right. That's right. You're hearing where I'm at. And that's not easy to pursue if you feel like there's danger.
And people don't understand why, right? They don't understand the damage that emotion causes in communication. If you've ever been around someone who's emotional, and I've been around, a few people in my life who were overly emotional creatures, and because they were overly emotional, they made terrible decisions and took terrible actions that caused negative consequences.
I'm right here, Brad. Don't just, and they weren't that bad.
Yeah,
they weren't that bad. I fixed almost all of them.
They were. Mark, we're here to have a conversation. Good morning, Mark. We're here to have a brief conversation with you about your smooth listening. So because if someone comes with emotion and you match those emotions, then it becomes conflict, right? Because emotion on emotion just increases emotion. It just compounds. And then you start saying things that you can't take back. Then you start saying things that are intended to land a punch, that are intended to be vindictive, that are intended to hurt someone. Well,
there's a slight subtlety I want to draw out, because I like to dig into the details. In the emotion, there's a weird phenomenon. If one person has an emotion of defense and you have an emotion of defense, then you've got emotions hitting each other. It's like randomness and chaos upon each other. It's exactly what you're describing. Sometimes there's a phenomenon of this person feels like the issue is important, and this person is acting too calm, suspiciously calm, or this person is like, you are not getting it. And sometimes there is a synergy you have to say like, I think you're saying this is very, very dangerous. And then that's, oh, now you're on the same wavelength. So there's like an alignment that goes with matching emotional. So if you're matching emotions, which is a very conscious effort for most people to give credibility to an upset customer, an upset client, an upset vendor, an upset employee, so they know you take it seriously like they do, there's an alignment that goes with that. But that's very different than like you reacting and trying to push it back, the fire with fire. That's totally different.
Yeah, but let's create another layer of delineation.
Mm-hmm.
Are you saying that we need to match their emotion or match their communication?
Well, you need to send them back the message at the same level.
So here's why I wanted to create that distinction.
Yeah.
Because if I see that you're excited about something, I might not be actually excited, but intellectually what I've identified is that you're excited about something, so I'm going to match your excitement.
Yeah.
Now that doesn't mean that I'm having the internal emotional feelings of that excitement, because I'm probably not, because this is your excitement, not mine. Right. But if I go, oh my God, that's fantastic. I mean, like, look, you have kids.
Yeah.
When your kids come home and they tell you something, hey, I got an A on a test, blah, blah, blah. In the back of your mind, you're thinking, well, no shit, you should, because that's your only job in life, is to go and study and make A's. That's what I expect. But you don't do that. You say, oh man, that's fantastic. Way to go. Now inside, you're probably not doing backflips because they got an A on a, basic math test in 4th grade. But you want to match and mirror their enthusiasm, their excitement to give back to them.
There's a connection.
The connection, right?
There's a connection. 2 kids getting excited. I can imagine 2 girls talking about like, oh my God, he talked to me. And they're just jumping up and down. Like there's a connection that happens there. And all humans, even adults, and especially adults, who I think get a little bit isolated from that connection through overthinking and distant in business relationships, where we actually crave that real connection, which is why organizations like EO have such loyal following, because people finally get to like be among their tribe and connect. So finding a way to connect for somebody, especially like, I'll take it very specifically in the IT world. I had a client and we were running their systems, and their systems were offline due to a software failure that was not our fault. But the client was calling so upset, and we were like, okay, we're working on it. And it would call back and call back and call back. And eventually I snapped, like, we needed to send the message that we cared about it as much as they did. They needed to see us as freaked out and angry on their behalf, and they needed to see that. And once we did that, they were like, cool, they got it.
Yeah. But you didn't have that true sense of feeling and emotion that they had.
It was slightly different, because I had empathy and fear about them being down, but it was, so yes, you're right.
The difference is, so when we're matching that energy to connect with people, it doesn't mean that we necessarily have that emotion. And that actually shows that.
Well, that's empathy. That's actually empathy. Empathy is it's like having the emotion, but not having the emotion.
But empathy is an adult.
Yeah.
Is a nurturing parent and an adult, right?
Yeah.
Because the nurturing parent is the one that calms people down. Oh man, I'm so sorry to hear that. Oh gosh. But then the adult triggers and says, okay, here's how I need to behave.
Yeah, there's a boundary and there's a containment. It's an intentionality.
Right. It's an intentionality. It's not an emotion-driven response.
Right.
It's an intellectual-driven response. And that's the difference. In business, we want intellectual-driven responses, not emotionally driven responses.
Yes, couldn't agree more. I'm glad we unpacked that, because that intentionality of if you take emotion and you put it in an intentional, intellectually controlled environment, like, it's super helpful. But it's not going to go run crazy. Like, it's not a wild dog off the chain. It's it's a very it's like a horse that's a racehorse that's going on a very specific path with a jockey who is you, who's in control.
Yeah, I mean, the emotion causes so much harm and damage, specifically in the business world, right? This morning when I was having that conversation, and I felt like I was being, it felt a little bit ambushed, and nobody was there to say, hey, this isn't, it's really not, no, it's not Brad's fault, da 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 da. I just, okay, well, I'm sorry that was what you were expecting. I can tell you what we've seen in other situations, and maybe you can tell me a little bit about what you're looking for and why that's important, and da 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 da. But I wasn't going to react emotionally, but I had to continually tell myself that, right? It was a very, very deliberate there was a lot of deliberateness in, okay, stay calm, you know, don't get ahead of yourself, don't get excited, just listen. Just listen, don't talk too much, don't try to defend or justify, just listen and ask questions. And so I mean that's the idea in business in general, right? I mean, you think about the people who our perception is they have it all together in business. What drives that? You know, so much that drives that is that they're responding intellectually and not emotionally. And there's something that has helped them get to that point, whether it's they have been trained on emotional neutrality, whether that was their upbringing and they always remained detached emotionally, or for some people, it's through the school of hard knocks and trial and error, right? You know, there's people that in negotiations never flinch, never waver because they don't care about the outcome because they're financially independent and they don't care how the deal turns out.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
You know, I mean, the worst person to ever, you know, I bought a lot. My wife and I bought a lot to build a house on years ago. And we bought it from, you know, someone who was very financially independent and didn't need the business, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm trying to negotiate with this guy. And, you know, the old adage is you never want to buy from somebody who doesn't need to sell.
Yeah.
And, you know, he had no motivation to sell, didn't care if he sold it or not. We wanted it, but we wanted a fair price. And so, you know, he was very unemotionally involved. Now,
Yeah.
me and my wife, on the other hand, we're eager and we're excited and we're anxious. You know, fortunately, he was a nice guy and gave us what I feel like was a fair deal. But yeah, he didn't care if I'm like, you know, I'm trying to make all the intellectual I mean, have you looked at your tax roll? You know how much you're paying in taxes a year on this? I mean, you've had this lot for over 6 years and da 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 da. I mean, you've spent, you know, $30,000 in taxes up to this point. Yeah, Brad, I don't care. Oh.
Well, it's interesting, the emotional side. 'Cause I keep wanting to go back to clarify where emotions are helpful and they're not, because I don't believe that like pretending emotions don't exist. I don't think that's the way to go. I think emotions can tell you really important things, and including emotions in your intellectual decisions is smart, especially when you're looking inward. And maybe you want to be careful with exactly how your emotions are displayed, but I do think it's appropriate sometimes to say, like, you know, what you just said made me angry, Brad. I'm not going to pretend it's not, and I'm going to be honest with myself. Do I want to do business with this person? I'm actually, if it's irrational, if it's like, this is a great deal and it's sucking it up for like 15 more minutes, and I'm intellectually like, I'll suck it up for 15 more minutes. Or I'm about to begin a lifelong relationship with somebody. This tells me I might not like you. Well, I'm going to let my emotion be my guide a little bit and say, let's take a break and let's see if we're going to do something here.
Yeah. So I respectfully disagree.
Well, that's total.
If we make that decision while we're emotional, I categorically.
See, I don't think you can totally remove the emotions. I think you have an emotion right now.
Now here's
and I have an emotion, and I'm getting emotional, and you can see
fair.
it.
I completely respect that. But if I've been in this situation before, and after I was done with that situation, I identified that the best response in that situation is to tell a person, hey, this frustrates me. I don't know if this is going to be a good. If I've made that decision in an unemotional frame of mind, whether it was after a debrief in a situation where I've been put in that spot before, or in a pre-call plan when I was expecting to come into this, then I totally agree with that. But if it's an emotional response to a person who's emotionally engaged with me, it's likely going to create conflict.
So to me, when you say emotional response, to me, it's sounding very binary. And to me, I'm thinking, because based on my perspective and my knowledge of how processing works, everything is emotionally filtered. Like literally nothing a human does that is not in some way emotionally filtered. It's processed through the emotional brain, and it colors how the facts land. And so to me, there's an integration of truth. Like, I'm emotionally comfortable with this. This is emotionally and intellectually balanced. And there are decisions I make that are emotionally led, that totally distort my intellectual. And I don't want to be making decisions in ways that are clouded. I do want to be making decisions that are that bring out my truth. That the things that I want most in life are emotional truths, not intellectual truths. I have spent a lot of time being very, very emotional or intellectually disciplined, and learned for my own benefit how far I can go with that. And there are things that, like, at some point the intellectual truth starts to, like, I'm not happy. And the truth is I'm not happy with doing this. And I need to move the intellectual formula a little bit about, like, how much money should I save? How much money should I spend right now? Like, I've pushed that too hard to the point where it's not fun to live. And so, like, I'm going to move that needle back, and I want the emotions to come through. And that's a healthy balance of my intellectual and my emotion.
See, and so what you're saying is you're echoing exactly what I just said, which is
no, I'm not. I'm right, and you're wrong. Whatever you said is wrong. Okay.
You learned all that stuff, right?
Yeah.
You learned all that stuff in retrospect while you were in the adult mind frame.
Yeah.
Assessing, okay, I did this, it didn't work, so here's how I'm going to handle that moving forward. And you did that in a moment of emotional neutrality, right? And so what you've taught yourself, and this is part of the emotional composure, is teaching yourself how to respond in those circumstances. And so you've taught yourself that in certain emotional situations, you have the right, and you feel like it's the right decision based on the debriefing and the lessons learned historically from the adult perspective. You've learned that when someone attacks you based on this topic, it's appropriate to respond with, that makes me angry, and here's why, maybe we shouldn't work together. That's not just a knee-jerk reaction.
Agreed.
Right?
Agreed.
And so that makes it an intellectual decision, not an emotional decision. Emotional decisions are those knee-jerk reactions where you just blurt out the first thing that comes out of your mouth and you deal with the consequences. And so, in business, whether we're a leader, whether we're a salesperson, whether we're a coach, whatever it might be, reacting emotionally rarely is going to drive reconciliation. Rarely is it going to lead to somewhere healthy. And so the more we can practice that emotional intelligence, and what you've done is over time, you've reflected on those emotional moments. And you've said, okay, you know what? I was too intellectual. I was too composed. I was too benign in those situations. And so I'm going to allow my emotions to come through in certain situations. That is 100% intellectual decision, because you made those decisions out in the absence of emotion, right? So that when you're in those moments,
I still don't think there's such thing as an absence of emotion, but I do think it is. It's curated. It's curated, it's rational, and rationality. I think that's a good word for me. I've done the math, I've checked it out, and the emotions and the intellect have been in the mix, and I've run the science, and experiments keep coming out like I want. And rationally, this is what I want this to happen.
It's the thickness of your filter, right?
Yeah.
Some people have no filter. It's one of those. It looks like this. And emotions just run right through and we react.
Yeah.
Some of us have a thick filter, which means that we have a long way that the emotions have to go through before we allow it out. Meaning that we recognize it, we know what those trigger moments are, we can feel it, we've identified it, and then we can think of it in a true sense, and not just right. We're dealing with the thoughts. We're taking our time. We're allowing ourselves to breathe. We're allowing ourselves to think, okay, how do I respond here? Do I just say this, or do I say that? And so some people have no filter at all. Some people have thick filters, meaning they've learned how to control the emotional responses.
And some people have filters most of the time, except for that one time. And the filter just falls off.
We've all been there. It found that one hole in the filter. It just shot straight through.
I'm very rational. What the hell is wrong with you? Get out of my... All right, we're about out of time, man.
Yeah. I'm about to say we have less than 30 seconds. So in an adult with an emotional standpoint tell us the closing comments for today.
Yeah, so I think we all have those moments when we're overwhelmed or the emotions sort of overtake us, and unfortunately, sometimes we can't fix those in the moment for the first time. But over time and through experience, we can really go into the lab and we can compare our emotions and our thoughts and our outcomes, and we can start to agree with ourselves about what's most important to us, and sort of give ourselves some pre-planned approaches to having those conversations that are uncomfortable, or at least we're not feeling prepared for, and understand how to put our emotions in check and just kind of building the formulas of what matters most to us so we can get good outcomes consistently over time. That's our time, and I really enjoyed that little disagreement kind of part of this, and we should do more of that in the future. And we will see you next time on Playing to Win with Mark and Brad.